And 10. Birthday Boy. Ray Salinger was a serial killer who operated in Gotham under the alias Birthday Boy, and he was actually the first costumed criminal encountered by Batman in his crime-fighting career. Introduced in Batman Earth 1 Volume 1 in June 2012, Birthday Boy is fascinated by young girls resembling his first kill. When in his killer mode, he wears a burlap sack with holes cut out for the eyes and a birthday party hat, usually in a room decorated like a birthday party. As a calling card, he left birthday candles where he stole away his victims and told his victims to make a wish that was decorated with the words "Happy Birthday Amanda," which is only creepier since we have Amanda here. And I feel like this guy is a representation of all of her DMs. That's right, I'm calling all of you nerds out. I think the sickest part of this character though was when he first started the whole Birthday Boy thing. He had been hired by Mayor Oswald Cobblepot to eliminate various enemies. In return, he was given girls from the streets or enemies of the Penguin as a reward. And at 9, Professor Pig. Professor Pig originally debuted in the alternate reality story of Batman number 666, which I love. He also debuted as a corpse, which I love even more. However, he was introduced as a recurring character in 2009 in Batman and Robin number 1. In Batman Reborn, Laszlo Valentine was an extreme circus mob boss until something turned him into Professor Pig, leading him to begin funding his scientific experiments by selling narcotics to the criminal underworld. All in all, he's an extremely disturbing villain, and that makes me think about why people aren't afraid of pigs as much as they are clowns, because if you ask me, this guy is freaking horrifying, okay? Professor Pig, if you couldn't tell, actually wears a pig mask, along with a butcher's apron, and what at times appears to be some form of hastily thrown together surgical outfit, like he got it from like Wish. Or he got it from like Party City. It's freaking weird. Also ends up brainwashing and controlling various people who he calls his Dolotrons. Like, I don't know what else there is to do other than just run away, so I'm gonna move on now. Although next time I have a pet pig in Minecraft, I know what I'm naming him. And at 8, Bootface. Okay, this guy's origin is the reason I wanted to talk about him. This guy's origin was simply him getting kicked in the face by Batman, and that's it, I'm not even kidding. Bootface was a thug working for Terminus. He got his name because of a boot imprint embedded into his face, which, like I said, is from Batman. Bootface first appeared in Batman and Robin Volume 2 number 10 from 2012, and honestly, it's one of the most interesting origins I've ever seen. And I mean this completely seriously. Everyone else has like a parent die, or was living in poverty, or was being abused. This dude just got kicked in the face and got so mad about it he became a supervillain. Even if he wasn't really like a good person beforehand. I mean, like, he was a thug and basically still is, but like still. Just this time, he has a ridiculous name to go with it, but hey, I still love it. And a man who is fueled by pure rage because he was permanently scarred by his attacker that ends up being a superhero, that's good enough for me. That's so funny. Bootface. And at 7, Mirror Man. Lloyd Ventures is a criminal who was detained in Gotham State Penitentiary. Using broken mirror shards, he distracts the guards long enough to escape from prison. Inspired by mirrors, I guess somehow, he becomes Mirror Man. Upon creating a machine that would enable him to see through objects, Mirror Man began targeting Batman so that he could find out his secret identity. He literally discovers Batman's identity as Bruce Wayne by using a X-ray mirror, which is freaking nuts. Like, what even is that? How is that a thing? Mirror Man actually gets sent to prison before he can reveal the identity though, but because they want conflict, of course, he manages to escape with a plan to reveal Bruce's identity to the world, only foiled when Alfred, dressed as Batman, interrupts a press conference that Bruce Wayne was hosting, instantly disproving the fact that Batman is Bruce Wayne, because you saw them both in the same room. Even though that, obviously Batman is partners. I don't know why people believe that. The public should have seen through this, okay? The people in Gotham City are dumber than we thought. I mean, they had Condiment King, so I guess they are dumb.
Number 6, Kulan Gath. Kulan Gath is probably one of the most iconic villains that Conan the Barbarian has had in the comics. He is so old, in fact, that he also became the enemy of another ancient villain known as the Mutant External, more specifically, Selene. Not to be confused with the Eternals, who are their own thing entirely. These are the Externals, not the Eternals. Kulan Gath made his first full feature appearance back in 1972 in the comics in Conan the Barbarian issue number 15.
Number 5, Lar Fleas. Lar Fleas, or Agent Orange, is one unique character in the emotional spectrum, and that's because he's the sole wielder of the Orange Light of Avarice. He is the only member of the Orange Lantern Corps. Lar Fleas is driven by an insatiable greed that grants him dominion over all that he desires, driving him into conflict with whoever possesses what it is that he desires, and over the power of the Orange Lanterns, which represent greed. His power is centered on his ability to conjure constructs using the stolen identity identities and forms of those he has absorbed into his horde, making him basically an army unto himself. This ability extends even to abstract concepts and beings, showcasing the extent of his control. The big thing about Larfleeze is that since he's spent so much time with his Orange Lantern and ring, he has basically become the Orange Lantern and ring himself. This energy grants him huge levels of power. His constructs are virtually indestructible and can overwhelm even the most powerful opponents. However, Larfleeze's power comes at the cost of his individuality, as his insatiable greed makes him less of a person and more of a living embodiment of greed itself. Even without the power of the Orange Lanterns though, his race is already basically immortal, with Larfleeze himself being billions of years old, and with enough power that I seriously doubt he'll be going down anytime soon.
Number 4. Thrallsa Doom. When it comes to Conan, he definitely has a type when it comes to some of his greatest enemies. Typically, he's caught in the midst of epic battles against evil sorcerers or wizards. In Thrallsa Doom's case, his brand of evil magic user is Necromancer. While Thrallsa Doom became a famous Conan villain thanks to his appearance as the main antagonist in the 1982 Conan the Barbarian movie, he initially started out as a villain for what some consider to be a more nuanced barbarian hero also created by Robert E. Howard, Kull of Atlantis, or Kull the Conqueror, as he was also known.
Number 3. Schuma Gorath. Yes, it is a giant tentacled eyeball, but hold off on the laughter because Schuma Gorath the Destroyer, the Conqueror of Midnight, the All-Killer of the Dawn, is a ridiculously ancient being and greatest of the old gods, or the many-angled ones. Among his many powers is the ability to communicate with and control others nearby and across entire dimensions. He can create and direct powerful blasts of mystical energy and affect transmutations on a planetary scale. His skin alone is difficult to damage even with the most powerful of magics. While his form seems pretty silly, cause it is, it's actually only a shell containing his power, and he can alter this appearance however he sees fit. This is actually because it's not even his true form. His true form is apparently not even comprehensible to us humans. Boo. Schuma Gorath can destroy multiple galaxies solely through his aura pressure, and this old god has also the ability to destroy entire realities. He is the most powerful in his home dimension, just like others of his kind, and only part of his power has actually appeared on Earth. And with the stuff he has done with that fraction of power, that should tell you just how powerful he is.
Number 2. Skrulls. All of them. There's many. They're not all bad, but they started bad. That's right, Skrulls are some of the oldest villains around, although they aren't exactly considered clean-cut villains anymore. In fact, some Skrulls have even become better known as heroes in recent years. Originally though, Skrulls appeared as a villainous alien race in Fantastic Four Volume 1, Issue number 2, and who were focused solely, during their appearance, on basically conquering Earth. This was right after the FF team had been introduced in the previous issue, which was basically all Issue 1 was really about, the team's origin story. Skrulls knew that the FF were the main protectors of Earth, at this point anyways, despite the fact that they had just sorta, started their superhero careers, which is pretty crazy. Knowing this, the Skrulls decided to pose as the FF and commit a bunch of villainous deeds while impersonating them, hoping to discredit the Fantastic Four to the point that the US military would capture and then kill the Fantastic team. With the Fantastic Four disposed of, the Earth would then be ripe for the Skrulls' taking. Of course, this plan was foiled as the FF trapped the imposters and ended up posing as them, taking the Skrulls' idea but executing it much better. Disguised as the Skrulls, the FF would tell the Skrull leader that Earth's defenses were too powerful for the invasion to succeed, causing them to just call off the invasion. The Skrulls that originally posed as the Fantastic Four members were forced to stay behind after the invasion left, taking the form of cows and living in apparent peace, as they apparently really enjoyed living as cows. Skrulls themselves can live hundreds of years, and their empire has existed for tens of millions of years, which means those cows are gonna be really, really old.
Can you imagine you're like millions of years old conquerors, and then you go to the planet, you make all your all the way there, and then someone's like, you know what, I think it's gonna be too hard, and they're just like, you're right, let's just go.
You're right.
You're right, we should just go.
And then those guys are just like, why don't we just be cows? And that's your life.
Moo. Number 1, the Great Darkness. You can't get much more ancient than existing before creation itself. The Great Darkness was the literal darkness and nothingness that existed before the Presence ever came to be. When the Presence, aka God in DC Comics, said, "Let there be light," the Great Darkness is the one who went into hiding. At some point, a clan known as the Brujeria, I believe is how you pronounce it, attempted a ritual to reawaken the Great Darkness in order to destroy God and reshape the universe. Instead of being completely evil though, this was more more like an animal who was confused and didn't understand its power or what its purpose even was in the universe. The Great Darkness, also sometimes referred to as the Great Evil Beast, went on a warpath, easily defeating many heroes and waging a solo assault on heaven itself, decimating everything in its way to demand answers from the presence. It even caused the three main figures of Hell to form a union with each other just in case something went wrong. When the Great Darkness reached heaven though, it met Swamp Thing of all people, who taught it the concept of good and evil, explaining that one couldn't survive without the other. The darkness then reached up and God reached back, and they became one and the same as like yin and yang, or as a balance. Recently though, the Great Darkness played a large role in the Dark Crisis event. It's basically the overarching villain of the entire DC multiverse, but also just kind of force of nature doing its thing.
Coming in at number 10, we have the intelligent zombie Solomon Grundy. Inspired by a 19th century English nursery rhyme, Solomon Grundy was born centuries ago as a wealthy merchant, but after being murdered and having his body dumped in a swamp with mystical properties, he's now cursed to constantly be resurrected with slightly different properties each time. Usually being depicted as an incredibly physically strong zombie, Grundy's greatest power is his resilience to both magic and physical damage, meaning that every time he's faced by Batman, he needs to figure out a whole new clever plan to find a way to properly defeat him. Coming in at number 9, we've got to go with Clayface. When you're facing off against the world's greatest detective, being able to disguise yourself as anyone seems like a pretty useful skill to have. This alone would make Clayface a difficult foe for Batman to overcome, but combine that with the huge amounts of physical strength that Clayface possesses when he changes into his more monstrous Hulk-like form, and you have a rare mix of stealth and strength that keeps Bruce Wayne on his toes. This ability to manipulate others through careful mimicry allows Clayface to be far more intelligent than he appears. And while his skill as an actor comes across as funny in depictions such as the Harley Quinn TV show, it can be quite deadly under more serious circumstances. Coming in at number 8, we've got to go with the bladed assassin, Deathstroke. While in recent years, Slade Wilson has become more well-known for tormenting the Teen Titans, Deathstroke has also had many run-ins with the Justice League and the Dark Knight himself. With his brain operating at 9 times the efficiency of a normal human brain, Deathstroke is exactly the type of opponent that pushes Batman to his physical limits, with a complete mastery of every weapon he has at his disposal. Combine that with his Icon suit, which has been shown to even be able to withstand a punch from metahumans such as Superman, and this is a foe that Batman is always just barely able to outwit and defeat. Coming in at number 7, we have the malicious psychologist known as Hugo Strange. One of Batman's oldest villains, originally debuting only a few issues after the Caped Crusader himself in Detective Comics, Professor Hugo Strange was also one of the very first villains to ever figure out his secret identity as Bruce Wayne. While initially depicted as a typical mad scientist stereotype, more recent interpretations of the character have seen him as a devious manipulator, using his position of power as a doctor of psychology to examine the criminals of Arkham Asylum and scheming to gain power throughout Gotham City. It's this emphasis on mental ability rather than actual superpowers that makes Hugo Strange such an interesting villain to deal with, and the fact that he's consistently been able to figure out Batman's biggest secret in multiple different universes means that Hugo Strange just might be one of Bruce Wayne's biggest threats.
Speaking of which, in its 6th, Condiment King. The Condiment King, created by Bruce Timm and Paul Dini for Batman the Animated Series, is a villain who makes use of various condiments, sometimes capable of causing anaphylactic shock, and his weapons are literally like those squeeze tubes for ketchup and mustard, just on guns. It's hilarious. He's generally used as comic relief within the series, but still. He would make many condiment-based puns. For example, the big bad bat guy, I knew you'd catch up to me sooner. How I relished this meeting. You, the dynamic Dark Knight, versus me, the conceptual Condiment King. Come, Batman, let's see if you can cut the mustard. The Condiment King is seemingly killed after being betrayed and bludgeoned by the human flame, with his own catchphrase ketchup and mustard guns in the miniseries Final Crisis Aftermath Run, which is a comic book, which already shows how he can actually be deadly aside from the whole like anaphylactic shock thing. And that's again not taking into account any potential allergic reactions that he can trigger or blindness. I mean, like, ketchup and mustard are very acidic and can cause some serious damage if left unchecked. It just goes right into the eyes, you know? Plus, what if you have fries and he gives you mustard, okay? The only appropriate punishment for that is death. Halfway through into number 5, Joker's daughter. Unfortunately, it's not the Joker's biological daughter. That would have been an interesting story. This is just a girl who finds Joker's face, stitches it onto hers, and then goes berserk. So honestly, it could very well be his biological daughter. The only person that I think would commit such an atrocious act is in fact the Joker, so who knows? While maybe not being as prolific or accomplished as the Joker, Joker's daughter is definitely insane enough for this list. Like, even if I'm pretty sure like a lot of people know she exists and like not many people underestimate her, but hey, look, even if one person underestimates her and they watch this video, boom, it's enough. It counts, okay? Not to mention the fact that she also went by Catgirl, Scarecrow, Riddler's daughter, Penguin's daughter, Cardqueed, and Harley Quinn. Each incarnation also calling herself the respected super person's daughter, which I have to say is going to make a family reunion real awkward. But in actuality, she ended up being Dwella Dent, Two-Face's daughter, apparently, which is seemingly BS in my opinion, but we love a girl with a little flair, you know? And that flair will cause her to ruin Gotham City. In at 4, Clock King. Born William Talkman, Clock King spends his early years taking care of his invalid sister. One day he finds out from a doctor that he himself only has 6 months to live. Great. Despairing for his sister's future, he watches the timing of a local bank's vault in order to rob it, hoping that the money would provide for his sister after he was gone. His caper would have gone on successfully had he not tripped the silent alarm and been caught by the Green Arrow. The Clock King then goes on to join Major Disasters in Justice League, which becomes the Justice League Antarctica. This JLA includes G-Nort, who ends up saving the lives of the entire team. The original Clock King had no metahuman powers or abilities, although he is athletic and extraordinarily smart. He extensively uses clocks and time-related gimmicks to devastating effect. His primary weapon is a sword forged into the shape of a clock's hand that also doubles as a walking stick. And his skill in swordsmanship is such that even Batman himself could not defeat him in single combat. So watch out for Clock King. Getting close to the end of number 3, the Calculator. While the Calculator now seems to be an oracle of sorts for supervillains, the original purpose and MO of the Calculator is far more entertaining and interesting, at least to me. Noah Cutler began his criminal career by crossing the country and getting into fights with various superheroes on purpose, analyzing and recording their battle tactics to ensure that he couldn't be beaten again. Or in some incarnations, he would simply get beaten and then press a button on his chest to ensure that he didn't get beat again. Maybe that was like taking in the information or something, like how Iron Man would just say like analyze his fight patterns and then come up with countermeasures, you know? But either way, okay, do you know how insanely overpowered that could have been? Just being able to like press a button and then boom, you're instantly basically immune to Batman or Robin or even Superman. Like that would be absolutely amazing. You do this enough times, you could just do whatever you want. And like then other criminals like start paying you to do their crimes for them because you guarantee success. That's freaking nuts. Okay, I wish they kept that Calculator. That could have been an even bigger threat than Darkseid if he kept going at it like that. This is why I'm the hero, because I would be unstoppable as a villain. Penultimately in at number 2, Lex Joker. Lex Joker was created when John Dee, also known as Dr. Destiny, collapsed the DC universe in half. First appearing in Superman Batman number 60 in 2009, Lex Joker is the combination of, you guessed it, Lex Luthor and Joker. Lex Joker hired Doomstroke and Terranado to destroy the Justice Titans. However, after the JTs allied with Batman and Superman, he hired 4 more mercenaries to create the Brotherhood of Injustice. Thanks to Terra, who had gone undercover with the JTs, they were able to attack the Justice Tower and come on, let's be honest. If you have the brains of Lex Luthor and the complete insanity of the Joker, you're making one heck of an opponent. When you have 2 powerful forces in comics, at some point there's like bound to be a mashup of the 2 to create a larger, even more powerful villain. And Lex Joker is probably the scariest combination we could have gotten that wasn't like Joker and Doomsday or Joker and Darkseid. Oh god, Joker Darkseid. And finally, in at number 1, the Eraser. The Eraser was the chosen alias of Lenny Fiasco, who turned to crime after living his college days under constant mocking and taunting by his classmates. Of course, it's because, you know, that's what college is like. No, that's high school, bro. Fiasco is a professional at covering the tracks of other crimes. For a 20% cut, the Eraser will erase the evidence of another crime. And honestly, I think that it's like the only job that anyone with the name Fiasco could have. The villain's power is a special helmet designed to look like a pencil eraser, because of course it is, that can wipe off evidence, even those that would be invisible to the naked eye, which is pretty damn cool when you think about it. After Batman posed as a villain to try to capture the eraser, the villain told Bruce that he had became a criminal because Bruce had shattered his dreams of going out with Celia Smith. I'm not even gonna get into that, okay? Bruce didn't even remember her name, which made the eraser angry. And I think that this is probably the absolute coolest concept for a supervillain, because in all honesty, if this guy wasn't an idiot, he could have ruled the world. Like, just straight up, this guy would absolutely ruin any and all investigations and then turn the tides of trials. This guy could have ended up being just like a shadow government in himself, okay? If only he wasn't just a dumb.
Number 10. The Inheritors. The Inheritors are Morland's crew and family. The clan Morland himself is also a part of. They're a powerful energy vampire clan which hunt down various totems and consume them. Because yeah, there aren't just spider totems out there apparently. I want to know though, are there anteater totems, and can I be one? Please write me into a comic as an anteater totem. Someone, please. Spider totems, for those who don't know, are spider folks from across the multiverse who are basically destined to end up being connected to the spirit of the spider, either possessing powers related to the spider or some other important connection which generally gives them purpose. The Inheritors ended up getting control over the Master Weaver and used their knowledge and power to traverse the multiverse and hunt down spider totems within it. The Inheritors are generally led by Solus or Morland, and the clan has included Verna, Genix, Karn, Bora, Brix, Dara, Deimos, Malos, Mortia, Namura, and Thanos. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like button? Seriously, it feeds the algorithm and it feeds my soul. Number 9. Miriam Drew, or rather, a bunch of Miriam Drews. Miriam's Drews. Many of them. An army of them. A clone army of Miriam Drews. Who was Miriam Drew, you might be asking? Jessica Drew's mother. In the previous Spider-Woman series by Carlo Pacheco and Pere Perez, Jessica had to face off against a bunch of her mom's clones, after learning that the woman whose base she was in wasn't really her mother, but instead a clone of her. After watching her mom go from loving and considerate, seemingly having missed her daughter, to violent and aggressive, blaming Jessica for basically everything that had gone wrong in her life, Jessica then basically had to fight off an entire army of her mom's clones, ultimately. Like Jess at the time, her clone moms were also juicing, which also made them scary foes to face both in form and in power. If you don't believe me, read the series. Number 8. Zodiac. Zodiac is a blast from the past. He was a villain who was first introduced in 2010, but only recently reappeared in the comics, pledging to become Moon Knight's sworn nemesis. A very different vibe from Raul Bushman, honestly. Zodiac reminds me more of Joker or Deadpool when it comes to his antics. He's both brilliant, but also criminally insane. But it is his penchant for creative and deadly thinking that makes him honestly so dangerous. Like when he took on Moon Knight's ally, Reese, a vampire, not with a cross around his neck, but instead wearing his own name around his neck, as he clarified that it actually wasn't the cross vampires were weak to, it was faith, and Zodiac believes devoutly in only one thing: Zodiac. Number 7. Tyler Stone. Alchemax is a future villainous corporation from the 2099 Marvel Universe of Earth 928. But of course, a corporation is only ever as evil as the people behind it. One of which is, of course, Tyler Stone, the vice president of Alchemax's R&D department. Tyler Stone is not only VP of Research and Development at Alchemax, but he is also secretly Miguel O'Hara's, aka Spider-Man 2099's, biological father. Miguel doesn't learn until later on that he is Stone's son, and ends up working for Alchemax as a brilliant geneticist. When he tries to leave, however, it is Stone who slips him the highly addictive and expensive substance Rapture, made exclusively by Alchemax, to prevent him from leaving. Fortunately, Miguel manages to free himself by becoming his own experimental test subject, accidentally becoming the spider-like hero, Spider-Man 2099.
Coming in at number 6, we have Bane, the villain who broke the bat. A brilliant tactical warrior who was raised from childhood inside an island prison, Bane's most notable act was when he systematically eliminated Batman's support system and eventually faced and bested him in single combat, shattering Bruce Wayne's spine over his knee. This victory over the Dark Knight was only temporary, but has still given Bane an intimidating reputation that he more than lives up to, going on to become a supervillain crime boss and proving that Bane isn't just about pure physical strength, but that he's also a ruthless and brutal strategist as well, even willing to kill Alfred Pennyworth just to emotionally shatter Damian Wayne. It just goes to show that you should never ever underestimate Bane. Coming in at number 5, we have Oswald Cobblepot, aka The Penguin. The owner of the Iceberg Lounge, perhaps the most famous criminal hangout in all of Gotham City, the Penguin might look similar to his namesake, but is far more deadly in reality. While an impressive crime lord even without any superhuman enhancements, the Penguin is made extra deadly by the special umbrella he carries, which is always stuffed to the brim with different lethal gadgets to help him fight against Batman or any other supervillain that seems interested in starting a turf war. This unpredictability and Oswald's sanity not quite being all there make the Penguin an incredibly difficult opponent to read, hiding the fact that this crime lord is far more dangerous than he initially appears. Coming in at number 4, we've got the reality warping Bat-Mite. A troublesome imp from the same 5th dimension as the Superman villain Mr. Mxyzptlk, the Bat-Mite is honestly more of a nuisance than a flat-out supervillain, often appearing just to try and challenge Batman or to see more of his heroic acts. Sending Bat-Mite back to his own dimension is usually a tall order given his complete reality warping powers, but luckily the world's greatest detective is usually smart enough to outwit Bat-Mite and send him packing to where he truly belongs. However, 5th dimensional beings have nearly limitless power within our regular 3-dimensional universe, meaning that Bat-Mite should probably have a close eye kept on him in the future. Coming in at number 3, we have Arthur Brown, aka the Clue Master. Not to be confused with the similarly themed Riddler, the Clue Master is a former game show host who wound up turning to crime in order to pay the bills. The father of Batman ally Spoiler, the Clue Master for a time seemed to embrace the role of being a second-rate supervillain, before it was eventually revealed that his status as a Riddler ripoff was actually intentional, and that organizing Batman's more underrated foes was his master plan all along to avoid detection. It's not often that a villain is able to temporarily outwit the Caped Crusader, and Clue Master shows just how powerful the right man with a plan can become. Coming in at number 2, we've got Poison Ivy. Born under the name of Pamela Isley, Poison Ivy has always been dead set on protecting the green plant life of the planet Earth, and especially values it over human life. While well known for being able to control plants and utilizing poisonous kisses as a weapon, Ivy's powers may be beyond what she usually shows off. In a particularly noteworthy storyline, Poison Ivy was able to mind control essentially the entire human population of Earth through their consumption of fruits and vegetables. And while that's definitely some weird comic book logic as to how that would work, Batman was only barely able to defeat her by bringing her into contact with the one human being she cares about the most, Harley Quinn. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the Batman Who Laughs. In a dark alternate world where the Joker realizes he's dying and begins a mass killing spree of everyone in Gotham, Batman is forced to finally kill his iconic foe. Unfortunately, at the moment of death, Bruce Wayne is infected with a special brand of Joker venom that completely flips his moral compass, but leaves intact all of his intelligence and tactical planning. All of the chaos of the Joker with the brains of Batman, this supervillain is Bruce Wayne's worst nightmare come to life, and was able to become so powerful over the course of his war against the multiverse that he was only able to be defeated by a literal God mode powered Wonder Woman.
In at 10, Rainbow Raider. The reason that all the good guys are good is because of their morals. Because they channel their anger into something positive. Because they can control themselves. But what happens when a hero with powers like Superman is filled with a red-hot rage? Well, we saw it in Injustice. But someone able to cause those emotions, that person being Rainbow Raider, makes them pretty damn powerful. Rainbow Raider's power is derived entirely from their special goggles, okay? Which allows him to project solid beams of rainbow colored light that he can either use offensively or as a slide for travel, and he can also coat people in certain colors of light to induce emotions, like blue for sadness, red for anger. There's also the Rainbow Raiders, a team of super color themed villains that also have powers based on the color of their rainbow. However, just the ability to induce emotion by covering someone in light is enough to make Roy G. Bigelow pretty damn powerful. If all my rage came out and I had super speed, damn, people would have to like hide in fear, but it wouldn't matter because I would find them. And at 9, Zoom. I included a CW character on this list specifically for the guy in my DMs who told me to stop doing it. The CW version of Zoom was not exactly what everyone was expecting, although you have to admit he is one of the best and scariest villains in the Arrowverse to date. The sheer demonic look he had, especially with the suit, shook even me. However, thanks to the Velocity 9 that he was taking, Hunter Zolomon was incredibly fast, the fastest we had ever seen at that point. So fast even that in order to fight him, Barry had to take speed out of the equation. And during the final fight, Barry had to create a time remnant because he wasn't fast enough to stop Zoom with only one of him. It only got worse after Zoom kidnapped Wally and Barry had to give Zoom his speed in order to get Wally back. This only made Zoom faster. It gets even worse when in the final fight the Time Wraiths come out of the Speed Force and take Zoom, which changes him into the Black Flash, and then he gets supercharged by the Speed Force to become the living embodiment of death for all speedsters. Plus, I mean, this guy was able to create breaches at will to bring hundreds of metahumans over to Earth 1. That's pretty damn impressive. And at 8, Johnny Quick. Johnny Allen, alias Johnny Quick, is a criminal speedster from Earth 3. Together with his girlfriend and partner in crime Atomica, he was a member of the crime syndicate. Johnny Allen was a high-profile criminal, on the run with his equally criminal girlfriend. Cornered on the roof of Central City's Star Labs, Allen was struck by a bolt of lightning which shattered the roof. The duo fell into the lab space below, with Allen landing amid the chemicals that gave, presumably, Earth 1 Barry his speed. Something in this incident, probably the chemicals, granted him his super speed, and he went on to become a super criminal alongside his girlfriend, who had also been given powers. While his girlfriend took on the name Atomica, he took on the name Johnny Quick. The couple joined the crime syndicate at some point after this, and they ran through Central City, answering to no one, until one day the White House burned, around the time of Darkseid's incursion onto Earth Prime. The being that had destroyed Ultraman's Krypton came to Earth, and an alliance of supercriminals formed to find a way to safety. So yeah, it's basically just Barry Allen, but Earth 3. I say that's pretty overpowered. And at 7, Weather Wizard. Meteorological madman known as the Weather Wizard was a menace to both Barry Allen and Wally West's Flash, and one of the most overpowered supercriminals they've ever faced. First appearing in 1959's The Flash number 110, criminal Mark Martin armed himself with the Weather Wand, an advanced piece of technology which could control like atoms in the universe, some form of energy, okay? Martin took the wand from his deceased brother, a scientist who never intended it to leave his lab. With some modifications, it became a deadly weapon for the criminal, and at full power, the wand could summon lightning storms, rain clouds, or change the weather entirely. Whatever the weather was, Martin could use his mighty powers to rob banks and cause mass panic. A later reimagining of the Weather Wizard would see him instead granted the metahuman ability to control the elements without using the wand. And the Weather Wizard also appeared in the CW's Flash TV show as one of the many metahumans created by the particle accelerator explosion which gave Barry Allen his powers. However, on the show there are 2 versions, one of them appearing in the first episode which Joe West killed, and the second appearing in the 16th episode of that season, with the second one being the first's older brother, the Martin brothers, Clyde being the first one, and Mark being the second and the proper Weather Wizard. As Cisco said, he's been waiting to use that name since day 1.
Number 6. Zombie Ant-Man. In the Marvel Zombies world, Black Panther was one of the sole survivors when the zombies first attacked, and turned most of his friends into zombified versions of themselves. One such former friend, Hank Pym, actually just managed to trick T'Challa into coming with him. Or well, he almost did. Either way, Hank managed to trick T'Challa enough to get him to a place where he could basically incapacitate him and then hide him away. Having already begun to change himself, Hank basically planned to use Black Panther, his friend, as a food source. Because Hank is a genius, which means when he's a zombie, he's a really dangerous genius. Hank kept him locked away and alive while slowly savoring and devouring his friend. Fortunately, Black Panther would escape and even become the leader of a land of survivors, although he would eventually turn into a zombie himself, much later on. But lesson learned, watch out for zombie Hank Pym if there's a zombie apocalypse. Number 5. Taskmaster. In the comics, Tony Masters is Taskmaster, and he is well known as an Avengers villain. And it is through his clashes with that team that Taskmaster also became a recurring villain of Hawkeye as well. Now, you might not know it to just look at Taskmaster, but the two have had some pretty epic fights over the years, with Masters himself also possessing marksmanship skills to rival that of, get this, Hawkeye himself, and also being known as a villain who is proficient with the use of a bow and trick arrows. In the comics, Taskmaster has an eidetic memory, or a photographic memory, that also extends to him being able to replicate pretty much any abilities or skill sets that he sees. So while he can also mimic Hawkeye's skills and abilities, he can also match the fighting style of pretty much anyone he watches, as well as learn their specific skill set too just from watching it, as long as it isn't a superpower specific skill like, you know, flying. Taskmaster is also known for being a brilliant tactician as a mercenary, and often uses strategic thinking to take down opponents who are more powerful than him, which is why he's one you honestly need to watch out for. Number 4. Zenu. Zenu is also known as the Living Hulk, and is a being that uses hypnosis powers to take control of others' minds. On more than one occasion, he has attempted to use these powers to try and conquer Earth and bend the minds of its entire populace to his will. In fact, while he's also attempted this feat in the pages of Immortal Hulk, this was also something he tried in his very first appearance. Back then he was trying to mind control the human race in order to get them to build a ship to basically return him home. Doesn't sound like such an evil plan until you realize the force that the ship would have to create would basically rip the Earth asunder once that ship took off, due to the great force that it would need for that launch, so pretty evil. Number 3. High Evolutionary. As we saw in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the High Evolutionary is truly a villain to be feared. And honestly, when I found out that the High Evolutionary was going to be in the MCU, I was like, man, that's gonna be lame, because on paper, he's another kind of silly character, especially when you consider that he's often used as a scapegoat for retcons, bizarre origins, and honestly pretty weird plot points. The fact remains though, the High Evolutionary, as the film proves, is truly the be-all and end-all of Marvel's mad science department, and the god complex he has in the MCU basically sums up so beautifully what is so frightening about him when you really think about it. He thinks he's perfecting life, when really he's basically warping and polluting it. Number 2. Thane. Thane is Thanos' son, and while he might not look that intimidating, he's definitely proven himself to be deadly in the past. Initially, Thanos was hunting down Thane because he feared Thane's potential power surmounting his own. He's basically afraid that Thane will rise up and overtake him, but in the end this wasn't something that Thanos really had to be particularly afraid of, it turned out. Even after he became empowered with the Phoenix Force, Thanos still managed to somehow defeat Thane, and this was also at a point when Thanos seemed himself to kind of be dying. Thane ended up being stripped of the Phoenix Force and ended up sentenced to suffering a hell-like existence in the God Quarry for the rest of his life. Or at least until some writer remembers he's still down there and decides to pull him back up again. Thane was also an Inhuman, and his powers are actually perfect for someone who is known to be Thanos' son, and are also pretty OP, I gotta say. He had a Death Touch ability that, while untamed, basically killed anyone within a certain radius, and he could also trap people in a state of living death through encasing them in amber, which honestly sounds awful. Honestly, while he's in prison for now, I'd watch out whenever he gets out of that God Quarry and is free again. Number 1. Monarch. I feel like we're always sleeping somewhat on Jamie Braddock here, and we honestly don't talk about him enough, so I'm gonna bump him up to the top spot this time around. Monarch, to you. Monarch is known for his reality warping powers, and while not always a villain, most of the time in the comics he has basically been a villain. What makes him different from other reality warping characters, and namely mutants out there? Monarch's powers work on a quantum level, and although there are people who can influence Monarch's powers by manipulating his mind, he also is pretty powerful as someone who can basically just make things happen by thinking them into existence. Yeah. He is the elder brother of twins Brian and Elizabeth Braddock, but despite being related to heroes, he seldom is one himself.
At number 10 is Brainiac 13. Brainiac 13 is a rendition of the original Brainiac that catapulted the character's might to unprecedented heights. Armed with advanced tech, Brainiac 13 orchestrated a jaw-dropping transformation of Metropolis, catapulting it eons ahead to the 64th century standard. But that was merely the prelude to his audacious exploits. exploits. Amidst the cataclysmic Impurex War, Brainiac 13 embarked on a daring gambit, pitting himself against the cosmic might of Impurex, a confrontation that saw him ascend to newfound power. The consequences were dire as his actions teetered on the brink of disseminating Earth and the ominous realm of apocalypse. Twist in his machinations revealed his bid to ensnare Kal-El eternally within a counterfeit Krypton. Brainiac 13's narrative arc stands as a testament to the boundless ingenuity of comic book storytelling, a captivating dance between unfettered power and the ceaseless resilience of iconic heroes. If you're enjoying the video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. And by the way, many of the entries from this list are from your very own suggestions, so if you have any more, drop them down below. At number 9 is my personal favorite, Abracadabra. Imagine a world where science has brushed away the mystical curtains of stage magic, rendering it obsolete. Yet in this brave new era, Citizen Abra emerges, an enigmatic figure hailing from the 64th century. Unveiling a longing for the art of performance, Abra crafts a time machine and goes back in time to when magic held an entertaining allure. Abra's audacious escapades escalate as he crosses paths with none other than the Flash himself, Barry Allen. Armed with a mesmerizing contraption that compels applause, Abra bends audiences to his will, eliciting ovation even for the most lackluster of feats. Unfazed by the audience's indifference, he embarks on a new venture, entangling himself in pivotal historical junctures. At number 8 is Professor Zoom. Meet Eobor Thawne, the temporal troublemaker known as Professor Zoom from the world of the Flash. This sinister speedster, hailing from the 25th century, isn't your typical roadrunner. Thawne is powered by the enigmatic negative speed force, granting him a whole arsenal of abilities. He's not just about dashing through time and dimensions, because his super speed isn't just a speed thing, because it's also a strength thing. Imagine facing a foe who combines the velocity of a bullet train with the brawn of a freight locomotive. That's basically Professor Zoom for you. But his powers go beyond the Fast and Furious. He's a molecular magician, letting him weave through solid objects like a ghostly apparition. And villain though he may be, in one universe iteration, he became the universe's last hope by manipulating matter itself. So while Professor Zoom might be a bane to the Flash, he's a prime example of how a speedster's potential can go far beyond the finish line. At number 7 is Fitzroy, with one of the most OP superpowers a mutant could have. Born in the same dystopian future as Bishop, Fitzroy's lineage is intertwined with the elite Hellfire Club. His mutant abilities are nothing short of intriguing. With crystalline hands, he can siphon the life force from any living being, converting their life energy for his own use. This lethal power disintegrates his victims, leaving a haunting mark. But that's not all, as Fitzroy's powers extend into the very fabric of time. By channeling the energy he absorbed from his enemies, he can forge temporal wormholes, essentially bridges across time and space. Yet, as I mentioned, these portals come at a cost. He must drain life force, with one's life traded for a passage through time. This is actually how Bishop himself was initially sent back in time to the modern era. Fitzroy's role as Bishop's main adversary adds to the riveting layer to the chronicles of the mutant world.
And at 6, Gorilla Grod. Gorilla Grod is a Flash rogue from Africa's Gorilla City. The original Grod, which debuted in DC Comics in 1959, was a telepath who could control other animals and also had a form of mind control as well over humans. In the New 52, all inhabitants of Gorilla City had accelerated mental attributes due to the Speed Force, but Grod was still the superior member of the species. On The Flash and the CW, Grod was a very intelligent gorilla experimented on at Star Labs to try and create a super soldier for the US government. However, the torture and unethical treatment of the gorilla caused him to grow angry and evil, and he escaped seeking vengeance. Grod had powerful mind control powers on top of superhuman strength and enhanced intellect, and at one point even combined with the Flash to be a psychopathic, telepathic gorilla with super speed. So I think it's safe to say that we should all be scared of Gorilla Grod. Plus, his pop figure is pretty damn cool. Halfway through into number 5, Savatar. The fact that Barry Allen was able to just beat this whole Savatar thing from The Flash Season 3 will always escape me. I won't really ever understand how they actually ended up defeating a literal version of Barry from the future. Like, I get how they managed to do it, but it was still incredibly unrealistic, since technically Savatar would have known beforehand that the timeline was changing, since technically that should, in my brain, at least be how time travel works, but this ended up being how it works in the show, so that's fine, I guess. I don't see how it ever would have been possible to defeat a future version of the Flash without this though, but I know that he couldn't really die, since if he died, Savatar wouldn't be able to happen. A future version of the Flash is always going to be mega OP, okay? said it. In at 4, Mirror Master. While Mirror Master never seemed like much more than a B-grade supervillain in Flash's Rogues Gallery, his power has made him so much more. Before he became a Flash version, the second Mirror Master, Evan McCulloch, was an assassin in Scotland and was already a formidable foe. However, once he got his mirror gun, he became insanely powerful. The mirror gun gives Mirror Master the ability to travel to an alternate dimension by entering and exiting any reflective surface. On top of being a significant pain in the Flash's side, Mirror Master has also fought Animal Man and was someone that gave him all he could handle. The CW used the Sam Scudder version, and he was only a minor villain, and then they kinda did Eva McCulloch for season 7, but honestly, even Sam being able to travel through mirrors like that, trapping the Flash in the mirror dimension for a time, this guy is certainly underestimated. Although I hope that they find a way to explore maybe some of his abilities in later comics or even the show. I'd like to see that. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, the Shade. This Golden Age Flash foe is one of the most powerful and most terrifying, but he isn't always on the side of evil, luckily. First appearing in Flash Comics number 33 from 1942, this immortal conduit for dark energy was a formidable enemy for Jay Garrick and often caused problems, the speedster, with his weaponized shadows. Kind of like my demons, causing me all kinds of problems as well. Initially depicted as a common criminal for the Flash to stop from robbing banks and menacing Keystone City in the 40s, the Shade was eventually reimagined as something much more sinister. Originally possessing a magic cane allowing him to control darkness, the revamped 90s Shade was given a real identity of Richard Swift and an endless supply of supernatural abilities. Returning to menace the hero Starman and eventually becoming his ally, the Shade used his powers of shadow manipulation, time travel, teleportation, and intangibility for both good and evil. The Shade also had his own dimension, the Shadowlands, where unwitting enemies would become trapped. And I think that having his own dimension earns him a spot in the top 3. Just saying. Penultimately, in at number 2, Red Death. Red Death is a speedster that is an evil combination of Batman and the Flash, which already sounds terrifying, but wait until you hear the story. The Bruce Wayne of Earth 52 started off fighting crime with Robin, but because, you know, of course, Robins kept dying left, right, and center. So, understandably, Batman got darker and darker, becoming more extreme with his methods. He started killing people, which honestly seems more realistic to me, aside from just like being done fighting crime totally, which can't happen, otherwise they wouldn't have a story, right? This eventually leads him to Barry, who refuses to give Bruce his Speed Force powers, understandably because again, this time Batman's a psycho. So, Batman, using the various rogues' weapons to fight Barry, knocks him out. Once Barry was unconscious, Bruce tied him to the front of a cosmic treadmill modified Batmobile, I don't know how the hell he did that, and then drives them both into the Speed Force. Again, I don't know how that happened or works logically, but okay. You do you, Bat Marty, we gotta get back to the future, your kids are in danger. When entering the Speed Force, Barry and Bruce, again, somehow ended up fusing together into an evil Batman with super speed and a lust for killing. And while Barry's mind was trapped inside Bruce's body, so he could just watch. He then gets a visit from the Batman Who Laughs, who was part of the Dark Knights and whose goal was conquering the multiverse, and since he was a version of Batman who was psycho, he was like, hey you, come here, come with me, we're the same kind of. And finally, in number 1, Black Lantern Reverse Flash. The Black Lantern Corps is a group of various dead superheroes and villains alike who were raised by Necron and each given a Black Lantern ring. This ring grants them power over death, and these rings are powered by the Anti-Monitor, as he is present within the Black Lantern power battery. Those raised by the Black Lantern ring are in essence resurrected to where they were before death, but their mind is warped to serve Necron's purpose. Now they aren't really like fully resurrected, but that's kind of like the best analogy that we have. Those with the ring have various powers including a healing factor, aura recognition which allows them to see powerful emotions, energy spectrum assimilation which lets them extract the hearts of individuals they've slain and use their last feelings to charge the central battery and their ring by 0.01%, because you know that's a lot, it's worth it. And they, much like zombies, can infect others by biting them. A bite from a Black Lantern will slowly kill the one bitten and then turn them into a Black Lantern upon death. Yeah, basically zombies with superpowers, so definitely not something to laugh at, especially when it's the man who killed Barry Allen's mother for the fun of it.
Number 10, J. Jonah Jameson. While JJ might not seem like the craziest supervillain out there, he has his moments, truly. Sure, he's just a guy who most of the time causes Spider-Man more grief in his civilian identity of Peter Parker as his loudmouthed, often angry and demanding boss, but if he gets his hands on robots, whew, watch out. JJ isn't at the level of world domination underestimation, but for the most part, Spider-Man fans generally just think of JJ as a nuisance, a menace, if you will, to Peter's everyday life. However, JJ has not only threatened Peter's livelihood and Spider-Man's reputation, but has also even gone toe-to-toe with Spider-Man himself, and even at one point took on She-Hulk. Typically, he's at his most dangerous whenever he gets his hands on the Spider Slayer robots or armor, which he often uses to more directly hunt Spider-Man or other heroes down himself, using muscles, or robo-muscles I guess, as opposed to just the written word. And let's not forget that the written word and media itself are also way more powerful than we maybe give them credit for, both in the comics and in real life. Number 9. Sandman. The only thing that really holds Sandman back from being so deadly is his own disinterest in crime. In the end, Sandman often resents what he has become and even grows to resent being a criminal. There are even times in the comics when Sandman has tried to turn over a new leaf and go against his story as a villain, becoming reformed, preferring to stay neutral, lawful, and of course even at times teaming up and aiding heroes. This is really what holds him back though. That, and in some cases, the vacuum cleaner. Though really that shouldn't have been able to hold Sandman at all, considering that he can control the sand that makes him up, which means that yeah, he can just kinda like move out of the vacuum cleaner, right? As sand particles. Sand is a powerful substance. It can cut you, it can get inside a wound, it's minuscule, it can get through and into almost any room or location, as it can pass through the smallest nooks and crannies. Sandman is also virtually immortal and can create duplicates of himself, allowing him to access a giant form by balling up all of these duplicates together. Now imagine if he did something like this, but on the scale of all of the sand in the world. Let's not forget that scientists have estimated that there are more grains of sand on planet Earth than stars within our universe. I know stars are bigger than grains of sand, but still, there's a lot of sand on this planet, like a lot of sand. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about Spider-Man villains, let us know by clicking that like button. Number 8. Morbius. Another villain that is really only curbed, I think, because of his often more heroic nature and sense of humanity is Morbius. Okay, so Morbius might not be a global level threat like we were talking about in the intro, but he's definitely more powerful than you might think. A lot of people probably don't think about Morbius much at all, I imagine, but like the lizard, if he's completely feral and unreserved, he's pretty dangerous. Recently in the comics, we saw that Morbius is back to being a fearsome, uncontrolled, ruled by his hunger, pseudo-science vampire, when he comes up against Ben Reilly's Spider-Man during the Beyond Spider-Man event. Ben struggled to fight against Morbius, and if it wasn't for some help from Beyond, he may have even died as a result of their battle. In the end, it took the Daughters of the Dragon duo, Colleen Wing and Misty Knight, together to take down Morbius, and even then, they may have only been able to do so because Morbius at that point was missing an arm. Dr. Michael Morbius can be quite strong when his power is completely unleashed, and there's nothing holding him back. Number 7. Flash Thompson. Flash Thompson isn't a villain anymore in the comics, but he did start out as one. And from his humble beginnings, you likely would not have imagined that he'd become so powerful as a character. Flash Thompson started out as Peter Parker's schoolyard bully. He didn't have any powers, he was just kind of a jerk. Over time though, Flash became less of an oaf and eventually even became a friend to Peter. He then goes on to serve in the military, becoming a decorated hero, and even becomes a superhero after he becomes Agent Venom, teaming up with the Venom symbiote, who also has a villainous origin story. Sure, Agent Anti-Venom, aka Flash Thompson, probably won't be the guy threatening the entire world, because, well, he's a hero, but he definitely now possesses enough power to instead be a hero who could potentially save the world. And considering that he was just your average run-of-the-mill high school bully, you probably wouldn't have expected him to come so far.
At number 6 is Nimrod. Now what might sound like a whimsical monitor carries a weighty resonance among X-Men enthusiasts. Despite its North American connotation of incompetence, Nimrod packs a literary punch, symbolizing a deft hunter. And let me tell you, that's precisely the association Nimrod has conjured. Enter the Nimrod of Days of Future Past, rooted in Earth 811, an incarnation of the Sentinel program. This mechanical marvel journeyed back in temporal torrents, fixated on obliterating our beloved mutants. But hold on to your cerebro, folks, because in the entangled narratives of Powers of X, a glimmer of a revelation emerges. Nimrod, our nimble hunter, holds the dystopian potential to thread the fabric of humanity and mutant kind's fate, where humans unwittingly serve as instruments in a symphony of mutant destruction. In a future where mutants teeter teeter on the precipice of oblivion. At number 5 is Tommy Tracer. This is a lesser known villain existing in the modern era who you would have only met if you read the super weird Spider-Man The Other series. This guy, if you can call him a guy because he's eventually revealed to be a robot, has the power to hack into and control anything with a computer chip. From traffic lights to nuclear launch sites, Tracer's got access. Additionally, the self-described machine god also has neat little bullets that relentlessly track onto a locked-on target, stopping only when Spidey literally turns and catches them. For as cool as this villain is, his role in the other comic is, well, minimal to say the least. But so was about everybody else in that series. Not to hate, I'm just spitting facts. At number 4 is Kronos. David Clinton, stepping onto the pages of DC Comics with Atom issue 3, emerges as a thorn in Ray Palmer's side. A life of crime led him to a prison cell where he found himself with an abundance of time to ponder his misdeeds. Yet instead of remorse, he became captivated by timepieces. Tick by tick, he honed his knowledge of clocks, gears, and the mechanics of time itself. And when the cell doors finally swung open, he emerged as Kronos, a time-traveling villain armed with unique devices. An exploding hourglass, a wicked wristwatch, and even a contraption that could slow down time itself, all at his fingertips. His criminal exploits spanned the DC animated universe as he plundered history's treasures. Yet when our heroes intervened, he sought to escape through temporal vortexes, trailed by the likes of Green Lantern, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Kronos is a figure who once reflected on time, ultimately became its master, weaving a narrative where past and present collided in a whirlwind of intrigue and theft. At number 3 is Nathaniel Richards. What if the smartest man alive was evil? Now don't get too worried. While Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four may not be evil, his half-brother's future descendant definitely is. Also known as Iron Lad, Immortus, Scarlet Centurion, Rama-Tut, Mr. Griffin, Dr. Doom, Kid Immortus, Saint Nathaniel, He Who Remains, and finally Kang the Conqueror, he's a descendant in the Richard Reed's family tree. He's one of the most convoluted characters in comic book history due to his numerous alternate timeline versions, and he's also possibly the greatest threat to the Marvel multiverse, with genius intellect matching that of Reed Richards. Brains are all this guy has, no superhuman powers necessary for multiversal domination. He invented time travel, enabling him to wield any tool or being across time for absolute conquest. Kang's complexity and unprecedented control over time make him a villain of unparalleled proportions, a chronicle conqueror standing on the precipice of endless possibilities. At number 2 is the Time Trapper. Trap as in to hunt, not the music genre. I feel like I have to make that decision. Legion's superhero arch-nemesis emerges as a warlord at Time's End. Despite loathing the Legion, this paradoxical figure ironically engineered their genesis to combat his foe, Mordu. Mordu's notorious Iron Curtain of Time prevents temporal exploration, fueling conjecture about his true identity. Brainiac number 5 speculated that Trapper was not just a person, but a sentient timeline in rebellion. What sets this entity apart is its mastery over Time's current. It erects impenetrable iron curtains, halting time travelers, and even Age's chosen targets, turning them into bone or ash. Even more astounding is it fragments time, forging independent pocket realms. Most astonishingly, one pocket universe retained only Earth and Krypton, expunging forces like the New Gods and the Guardians of the Universe. The Time Trapper manipulates time's tapestry with chilling finesse, weaving a web of chronal power that captivates the minds of Legion and theorists alike. At number 1 is Superior Iron Man, who is in fact a villain in this alternate timeline. A version of Tony Stark that's like the mirror universe reflection of our beloved genius inventor. This intriguing alter ego emerged after the Axis event, a storyline that flipped the moral compasses of heroes and villains. Tony, usually a poster child for heroism, found himself on the other side of the spectrum. And what a ride it was. And he didn't completely revert to his old self after the event, cleverly maintaining his wicked alignment in secret. Imagine this, Tony the charismatic villain pushing his tech agenda by releasing a subscription service app tied to the new extremist virus, allowing people to change their appearance at will, for a price of course. But fear not, cosmic enthusiasts, because Superior Iron Man was a limited phase. The hero within couldn't stay suppressed, and after a tumultuous Secret Wars event in 2015, Tony Stark was back to his virtuous self.
Number 10. Vanisher. An old school villain who also almost single-handedly defeated the X-Men back in the day. Almost. So close. Well, actually he kind of did defeat the X-Men team, but fortunately Professor X butt in to save the day. And he was only able to defeat Vanisher by wiping his mind and making him forget who he was and what he was capable of, which I think goes to show just how powerful of a villain he is. He was the first teleporter the team really encountered, proving just how crazy powerful teleporters are. Vanisher is also considered to be a super fast teleporter, and his power limits thus far have been pretty much undefined, even when he did resurface years later. I would consider him to be at a higher level though, just based on what I've seen thus far. He also was able to teleport himself safely just instinctually, even when teleporting to a place he's never seen or been to before, avoiding teleporting partially or fully into any solid objects, which of course could kill him, and which is like a great danger if you're a teleporter. You just teleport somewhere and now part of you's in a car and you're like, well, I guess I'm dead now. That's it. Number 9, Living Diamond. Okay, so someone I also think we need to talk about who needs some kind of redemption in the comics is Jack Winters, aka Jack O' Diamonds, or Living Diamond. He was one of the first X-Men villains whom Professor X saved Scott Summers from, thereby recruiting him to his X-Men team. Living Diamond's mutant power was believed to be radiation resistance, but he was also shown to be able to teleport short distances, had telepathy, and had a diamond form. Does that sound familiar at all? Telepathy with a diamond form. Somehow Living Diamond was way too easily defeated by a vibration beam which shattered him. I know Living Diamond is dead now and was undead at one point, but I really feel like considering how OP Emma Frost has become, Living Diamond should also get a second chance to prove just how powerful he in theory should be. I mean, if you got all that, how were you so easily defeated? And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about the unexpected yet powerful villains that we don't usually get to talk about, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Arcade. Arcade is one of those villains who feels super ridiculous with his grandiose plans for Murder World, but in reality, when he actually manages to achieve plots like Murder World, he's actually quite scary. I mean, getting a sneak peek into just what a ludicrous and horrifying operation he'd run in Hellions really made me appreciate just how dangerous Arcade can be if he does manage to get enough hostages, that is, to control people into working with him so he can create his Murder World. In Hellions number 9, it's revealed that the trap Mastermind walked the Hellions, and prior to that Mr. Sinister, into was a trap laid by Arcade himself. Gasp, what a reveal. Arcade's plan was to use Sinister's Hellions as leverage to encourage Sinister to work for him. Sinister didn't really seem to actually care about the Hellions, and he basically just agreed outright, although Arcade still chose to forcefully remove some of his teeth for fun before putting him to work. He wanted Sinister to make clones for him for Murder World, and had his plan worked, it would have been a real horror show. However, Sinister made a counteroffer to Mastermind, and instead the two double-crossed Arcade. Still, that whole like 3-issue arc made me believe in the power of Arcade. Like, if he has the right allies, he could be really crazy. I'm here for like some sort of plot where Arcade tries to just turn the world into Murder World or something. If that hasn't happened yet, someone write that for me, please. Maybe I should write that down. Maybe I should write that. I don't know. Marvel, call me. I got ideas apparently. Number 7, The Blob. The Blob is a villain that we don't often get to talk about on these supervillain lists. He tends to fall by the wayside, but truly he's pretty unstoppable. And when he puts his mind to something, or when he puts his body to something, he's a terribly tough villain to defeat or even move. The Blob was one of the first villains to appear in the original X-Men series, and when he did, he gave the team of youngsters a really tough time. He also attacked them with a circus. The Blob actually didn't start out as a villain, but became one due to the influence of Professor X and the X-Men themselves. Also, just thinking back and like the amount of times that the X-Men have fought circuses or been trapped in circuses, or that happens a lot. That's like a recurring theme. Initially, the X-Men attempted to recruit the Blob, but after the Blob refused to accept their offer, he managed to escape before Xavier could wipe his mind of their identities. This caused problems later on down the road, but really it was how the X-Men treated him after he refused to join, and kind of his own self-esteem, and then later his overcompensating sense of superiority that turned him into a villain. I wonder if the Blob actually could have been an ally if this whole scenario had just gone a little bit differently. The Blob is super strong, durable, and virtually immovable thanks to his ability to manipulate gravitational mass, which is pretty powerful. He also later gained a secondary mutation which gave him a liquid form, but he hasn't really exhibited a ton of control with his secondary power set. But he also has liquid form. That's on the resume of powers now. Number 6, Sauron. I've always felt bad for Sauron. Like, this dude does not get enough love when it comes to our boosting of supervillains here on the channel. I know Sauron seems kinda silly on paper, but he's also pretty diabolical and deadly when he wants to be. And if the person writing the character also believes in his prowess. Sauron can temporarily absorb mutant powers, is super strong, and somehow has functional pterodactyl hands that he can use to pick up weapons and items. I don't even know how he does that. That's nuts to me. Sauron is also an energy vampire, which means his powers are literally deadly. He needs life force energy to live, and when he absorbs life force energy, it can actually result in the death of his victim. Honestly, I think if he just had the right team up, he could be pretty unstoppable. Maybe with X-Men Green he'll be able to do something crazy. I really want X-Men Green to be like a super villain team. Kinda like Poison Ivy. Like, we're villains, but we're like saving the planet. Number 5. Sin Eater. Sin Eater saw a massive power upgrade recently. Initially, he was just a crazed man obsessed with absolving the sins of others through killing them. But more recently, in Nick Spencer's run on Spider-Man in 2020, he became so much more than that. In issue number 46, we see Sin Eater with newfound powers to actually absorb and absolve the sin of villains, and with those sins, he would also gain their powers. This meant that the sky was almost the limit for just how powerful of a villain Sin Eater could become. However, after learning that he was being manipulated by Kindred and kinda used as a pawn, Sin Eater became distraught and ended up taking his own life. He would later be resurrected as a corpse, but we don't really know what happened to said corpse after he was brought back and the fight against Kindred sort of came to a close. He could still be out there somewhere though, and who knows, he could have some of his former hyped up powers. I doubt it, but even if he doesn't, he did have it at one point, so I think we should count it. It was pretty cool. Number 4. Chameleon. Chameleon is definitely a hero who deserves more love and respect, or at least more disdain if you love to hate the greatest villains. He was the first villain that Spider-Man ever faced in his own series. A lot of people don't think of shapeshifters or masters of disguise first when it comes to power levels, but the reality is someone who is really good at disguising themselves as other people can be one of the most deadly and unstoppable villains around. I mean, look at what Mystique managed to do recently in X-Men's Inferno series, or look at what Chameleon might seemingly be up to currently in Devil's Reign. Not only is Chameleon great at creating chaos and hurting others by disguising himself as them, but he also is pretty good at just hatching plans as well. Number 3. Kingpin. When it comes to Kingpin, we usually think of him as a threat confined to New York City. In fact, some people don't even think of Kingpin at all when it comes to Spider-Man. Over the years, Kingpin has become more synonymous with the superhero Daredevil, even though Kingpin's first appearance was actually in a Spider-Man comic, making his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 50 during the original 1963 series. Lately in the comics, Kingpin has been setting his sights on a much more grand prize than just causing grief for New York, its citizens, and its heroes. He is taking on all of the superheroes based in the US that oppose him as he aims to run for president, using Kilgrave, yes, the Purple Man's powers, to encourage everyone to vote for him. Or else. Superheroes who do not ally themselves with Kingpin in this endeavor will face his wrath during Marvel's Devil's Reign event. Number 2. Mysterio. Another villain that often gets dismissed when it comes to Spider-Man's rogues gallery is Mysterio. Mysterio is a villain that is all smoke and mirrors, and illusions, which makes a lot of folks consider him to be not so real of a threat. Still, in the cinematic take on the character, we saw Mysterio almost completely fool the entire world, or while even being defeated, he kind of still did that. His plan here was to convince everyone that he was a hero and win them over to his side, and even despite seemingly dying, he actually still managed to kind of succeed. In the Old Man Logan universe, Mysterio is also the one behind defeating pretty much all of the X-Men by tricking Wolverine into thinking all of his friends were really supervillains, thereby getting Wolverine to kill the entire X-Men team and the school. Yikes. In other words, just because you think something isn't real doesn't mean that you shouldn't still fear it and that it can't still hurt you. A great illusion can be more powerful than actual action in some cases. Number 1. Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octopus is a villain that might be well respected among Spider-Man fans, but on a greater scale, he's not likely someone you think of when you think of a global level supervillain threat. But while he might not share the status of comic book villains like Dr. Doom, it doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve to instill that level of fear among the superhero community. Dr. Octopus might seem a bit silly with his haircut and his mechanical arms and his sometimes snazzy white suit and sunglasses, but let's not forget that he's actually a diabolical super genius whose brilliance combined with the sheer strength of his claws makes him a dangerous person to cross. Number 10. Namor. While many folks think of Namor as being an anti-hero, and honestly he most definitely is, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe he's only really been presented to us as like a straight up villain. Albeit a straight up villain with a pretty powerful and universally relatable motive, I would say. He does what he does in an effort to protect his people and to defend the oceans from those who would pollute and destroy them. AKA, that's us. I think we can all get behind that message. I know I can, as someone that, doesn't want our oceans to bubble and boil and just be filled with garbage. However, Namor's methods honestly could use some work from a heroic standpoint. Namor is presented as being both brutal and cruel when it comes to his actions, which makes him a villain in the MCU. While he is around 100 years old in the comics at this point, his live action adaptation was made considerably older and is estimated based on his origin to actually be around 500 years old. Woo!
Number 9. Black Adam. Another anti-hero? I promise this won't be a common occurrence. There are two main different origin stories for Black Adam. In the pre-New 52 era of DC, circa 1200 BC, the wizard Shazam became a high priest to the pharaoh Ramses II of Egypt. This is where he met the young prince Teth Adam of Kahndaq. Ramses' son. There we go. Teth Adam impressed the wizard with his fairness and decency, and boom, he was granted the power. But in the more recent continuity, Teth Adam was born in Egypt in the 26th century BCE along the banks of the Nile as part of the Kahndaqi tribe, and it did not take long for him to be forced into a life of unwilling servitude. Very different. His entire family lost their lives except for his nephew Aman. Aman would save Teth Adam's life, which got him the recognition of the wizard Shazam, who turned Aman into his champion. Aman then shared this power with his uncle Teth Adam, but not seeing eye to eye on how to use the power, Black Adam took his own nephew off of the board and stole the power for himself. This was before he was either banished, stuck in a scarab, or locked away in a tomb, depending on which era you want to talk about. But no matter when we are talking about, Black Adam has been a threat to everyone, and he took on almost the entire world when his family was taken from him back in DC's World War III.
Number 8. Rotath of Lemuria. Rotath of Lemuria is a common example of how magic was presented, often in stories that take place in the Hyborian Age, especially in regards to Conan's story there. He made his first appearance in issue number 37 of Conan the Barbarian from the 1970s, when almost everyone who read comics or otherwise was into the sword and sorcery genre. In this same issue, Rotath was killed by Kull after he was hired by the king of Lemuria, who was frightened of Rotath's power. As he died, Rotath cursed both the king and Kull, casting a spell so that he might return, and so he did. This time in a golden body, but still he ended up being defeated here. This time not by Kull directly, but instead by, well, a giant slug after fighting against Conan and Juma. This is a true story, by the way. Man, I hate when I get defeated by giant slugs.
Ah, slugs, man, they get you. It's funny because all you need is like a little bit of table salt.
Yes.
Take that sucker off the board. Alright, number 7, Yuga Khan. Yuga Khan is the first ever tyrannical ruler of the planet of Apocalypse, and the father of both Drax, who would become the Infinity Man, and Uxas, who would become Darkseid. Given his nature as essentially a god, and one that fathered the current gods, quote unquote, Yuga Khan is certainly ancient, being essentially immortal. As an example, before the fourth world is even fully formed, Yuga Khan alongside his wife Hegra and their sons ruled Apocalypse, creating one of the most feared empires in the entire universe. But being such an astronomically powerful being, it wasn't enough. Yuga Khan was obsessed with becoming the most powerful being in the universe and wanted to be able to essentially control it all. But he was also obsessed with finding out the reason for why it all existed in the first place. So he's a conqueror, but also a philosopher, which is nice. This obsession is what brought him to the Source Wall, getting trapped in it while trying to unravel the mysteries of the Source. All the inhabitants of New Genesis are way stronger, faster, and smarter than humans, being almost all on a level akin to Superman, while also being immortal. But Yuga Khan, he is the most powerful of them all. So much so that after an absolutely colossal effort effort, Yuga Khan was even able to break free of the Source Wall. That act released energies that could be felt throughout the galaxy and caused the universe itself to shake. He then replenished his power by absorbing the entire life force of the planet Velos and all its inhabitants, and then did the same thing with millions of other worlds while on his way back to Apokolips. His return to Apokolips made everyone tremble, including its current ruler, his own son, Darkseid, who he imprisoned in the core of the planet. Most recently though, Yuga Khan was one of the beings empowering Shazam during Darkseid War.
Mine are so Conan. I went really Conan with this list.
I respect that though.
I mean, there's lots of old guys, cause
Mine are all like spacey.
Yeah, it's so true though. Space is old. Number 6, Red Death. Also known as Kandra, Red Death currently has a very Scarlet Witch looking vibe going on, and I gotta say, I'm feeling it. And just like Scarlet Witch, she is not someone who you should underestimate. Kandra is part of the Externals, and while she isn't one of the most memorable of that mutant villain team, she's still someone who is super powerful. Technically, just being an External comes with a pretty big dose of power. The Externals, not to be confused with Marvel's Eternals, a different team entirely, are a group of immortal mutants basically. They have had various roles throughout history. One more prominent one that folks might remember Kandra from is her role as benefactress, when we learned of her history with Gambit and the Thieves and Assassins Guilds of New Orleans during Gambit's miniseries. In fact, that was actually where Kandra first was introduced in the comics, making her initial appearance in Gambit issue number 1 from the 1993 miniseries. Although the way they approach that introduction, you wouldn't necessarily maybe know that that was her first appearance, because she kind of shows up like, you know me, I'm Kandra. And I'm like, do we know you? Who are you? But it's alright, she's pretty powerful. Number 5, Moira X. Moira was at one point powerful enough to have almost successfully wiped out all mutants. If it weren't for Mystique and Destiny, she would have succeeded. Even though she claimed during that past life that she only intended to create a cure to offer it to those who wanted it, Destiny knew that any mutant cure would essentially become weaponized and then forced on mutants, regardless of their own wants and desires. For those who haven't been reading along recently with the events of the current X-Men line of comics, it was revealed that Moira herself was actually a mutant whose powers were basically reincarnation in her own form. Basically, she dies and then she comes back to life as like a baby and lives her life again. But when Moira dies, she ends up being reborn as herself, but with all the memories of that past life. As such, Moira wasn't just a dangerous potential villain for the X-Men, but kind of the whole of 616, which also seems to be tied to Moira's current life, which I believe is her 10th life. Pretty crazy stuff. Moira is no longer a mutant after being cured in the 2021 Inferno series when Mystique shot her with a gun of Forge's design, which basically turns mutants into humans. But she still is a dangerous woman with a lot of information. And it was heavily implied that the creation of Krakoa was kind of all about eventually ridding the world of mutants over time, with Krakoa being like their last hurrah in terms of Moira's plan. Time will tell if Moira becomes more villainous, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did, just based on where she was heading in this story. And when or if that does happen, you better watch out. Danger is the Danger Room. The Danger Room is a villain who surfaced because they were basically being mistreated by Professor X, who had decided to ignore the fact that the training room had become sentient and was itself a technologically based mutant. Eventually, Danger decided, enough of this shit. It's time to get some sweet, sweet revenge. The crazy thing about Danger is although we don't think of her too much, she really would be a pretty strong opponent to the X-Men considering she trained them, and as such would know their strengths and weaknesses. In fact, I think that even is mentioned in the comics at one point. She was also considered to be an extinction level threat that caused Steve Rogers great worry in Heroic Age X-Men, which is kind of like a glimpse into his like tactical commentary diary. So if you wanted to read that, it exists. So despite not thinking about Danger too much, we all probably should in case she ever decides to, you know, go the villain route again. Destroy everyone, because she could probably do that. Extinction level, friends. Number 3, Mystique. Mystique is someone who isn't particularly or at least outwardly powerful when it comes to what she's capable of or her power set, and for this reason, many people have taken to underestimating her abilities. Here's why we'd advise against that. Inferno, issue number 4. In the newest Inferno series, it's revealed that while Mystique tried to play by Krakoa's rules, when she learned she wasn't going to get what she wanted from Magneto and Professor X, no matter what she did in the name of the mutant nation, she decided to take matters into her own hands, as Mystique so often does. Disguising herself as many different people, she was able to easily ensure that Destiny was resurrected, against the wishes of the heads of the Quiet Council. She also put into motion plans to make sure that Destiny would garner a spot on the Quiet Council, and then she almost was successful in enacting revenge on Moira X for keeping her love, Destiny, from her. Mystique here proves that not only is her power set OP, but really that her mind and sense of cunning is what makes her so dangerous, and definitely not someone to be underestimated. Number 2. Destiny. Destiny has to be one of the most underestimated villains in recent years in comics. We have seen her resurface as a considerably dangerous villain in the current X books, and I'm personally loving it. Destiny was dead for quite a few years and actually got to mostly stay dead for much of them. Her mutant power allows her to see potential futures. She can see things that might come to pass, and it seems as though the more likely the future becomes, the clearer her vision of it is. She can also see more immediate futures when in the middle of a conflict. It was because of this power and Moira's personal grudge against and fear of Destiny that she remained unresurrected. But something you really shouldn't underestimate when it comes to Destiny is the power of love. Mystique was already told by Destiny before her death that if there came a time when mutants could be resurrected and they refused to bring her back, that Mystique should basically burn this new world to the ground. And Mystique's love of Destiny gave her the motivation to basically bring Krakoa to its knees with her machinations to not only return Destiny but also put her in a position of power. Precogs and love are a powerful mix. Number 1. Madeline Pryor. Of course, I have to include the Goblin Queen. Madeline Pryor is a woman who seems to easily be forgotten and shelved, which is surprising considering how great of a threat she posed in the original Inferno event. Currently in the comics, Madeline Pryor is making a comeback, returning at the end of the Hellion series after being killed as part of the comic's first arc. The Madeline Pryor that was killed was definitely feeling pretty evil and threatened to destroy the entire Hellions team before they even started. The returning Madeline, who has been resurrected by the Five, is at least putting on appearances that she's more level-headed, but in reality it seems the dark side of her still bubbles just beneath. Madeline Pryor has threatened the entire world with her dark rituals and demon pacts before, and she's a clone of Jean, so although she often gets forgotten and downplayed, she really shouldn't be considering just how dangerous and powerful she is, because Jean is also that and Maddie is also that too. She has the potential at least. Often people try to downplay Maddie because she's a Sinister created clone, but that feels very unfair to me. She's also got like a spark of the Phoenix Force in her, so should that count for something? I think so.